The journey to true happiness. In a small, quiet village nestled at the edge of a forest, there lived an elderly woman named Mary. Mary was beloved by all who knew her. She was the heart of the village, not because of her wealth or possessions. She had very little, but because of her kindness, her wisdom, and her willingness to help anyone in need. Mary lived in a simple cottage made of old stones and worn-out wood. It wasn't much, but it was enough for her. The roof sometimes leaked when it rained, and the fireplace didn't always burn as warmly as she would have liked, but she never complained. In fact, Mary was known for her cheerful spirit. She was always smiling, always ready to listen to others and offer advice or comfort. Her neighbors admired her. They often brought her small gifts, such as fresh vegetables from their gardens or loaves of warm bread from the village bakery. They knew that Mary had little, but she always seemed so content, so peaceful. How does she do it? They would wonder. How can she be so happy with so little? But Mary's happiness wasn't a mystery to her. She found joy in the simple things: an afternoon spent tending her small garden, the laughter of children playing outside her window, or a visit from a friend. To Mary, these moments were worth more than any riches. One cool autumn morning, as the leaves began to turn golden and the air grew crisp, Mary decided to take a walk in the forest. It was her favorite time of year, when the world seemed to slow down and the beauty of nature was all around her. She wrapped herself in a warm shawl, grabbed a small basket, and set out on her way. The path through the forest was familiar to Mary. She had walked it many times over the years. The trees stood tall and majestic, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. As she walked, Mary listened to the sound of birds chirping overhead and the crunch of leaves beneath her feet. She felt at peace. As she ventured deeper into the forest, something unusual caught her eye. Half hidden beneath a pile of fallen leaves was an old rusty pot. It looked like it had been there for years, forgotten by time. Curious, Mary bent down to take a closer look. The pot was large and heavy. It had a thick layer of dirt and rust covering its surface, but there was something about it that intrigued her. Carefully, she wiped away the dirt with her hands, revealing more of the pot's surface. And then, to her astonishment, she found that it was filled with gold coins. Hundreds of them, glittering in the soft autumn sunlight. Mary's heart skipped a beat. She had never seen so much gold in her life. The coins sparkled, their edges catching the light as if they were beckoning her to take them. For a moment, Mary stood frozen, staring at the gold. She couldn't believe her eyes. As the shock began to wear off, Mary's mind started to race. With this gold, she could change her life. She could buy a new house, one with a solid roof that didn't leak when it rained. She could have a big fireplace that always kept her warm, and maybe even some fine clothes to wear. She imagined herself living in comfort, without any worries about money. She thought about all the things she could buy, all the ways her life could be easier. The thought of no longer having to worry about firewood or leaking roofs filled her with excitement. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to dream of a life of luxury. But as quickly as the dream formed in her mind, reality came crashing back. The pot was far too heavy for her to carry by herself. Mary wasn't young or strong anymore, and the gold, though beautiful, was a burden she couldn't bear alone. She looked around the forest, hoping to see someone who could help, but she was all alone. Determined not to give up, Mary sat down and thought about what she could do. A plan forms. Mary wasn't one to give up easily. She had lived a long life, and if there was one thing she had learned, it was that every problem had a solution if you thought hard enough. After a few minutes, an idea came to her. Nearby there were a few fallen branches. They were long and sturdy, perfect for making a makeshift sled. With a bit of effort, she gathered the branches and tied them together with some rope she had in her basket. Then, using her hands and a lot of determination, she lifted the heavy pot of gold onto the sled. It wasn't easy, but Mary was strong in spirit. She pulled the sled slowly along the forest path, determined to bring the gold back to her cottage. The gold begins to change. As Mary pulled the sled through the forest, something strange began to happen. At first she didn't notice, but after a while she realized that the gold inside the pot was starting to change. The once bright, shining gold coins were losing their luster. They were turning silver. Mary stopped in her tracks. She stared at the pot, her heart sinking. Silver wasn't as valuable as gold, but it was still worth something. "It's fine," she told herself. "Silver is still good. I can still buy what I need." So she continued pulling the sled, her determination unwavering. But as she went on, the silver coins began to change again. This time, they turned into iron. A moment of despair. Mary felt her heart break a little as she watched the coins turn into iron. Iron was worth almost nothing. All of her dreams of a new life, of comfort and ease, seemed to vanish in an instant. The gold that had promised so much was now just a pile of iron, a metal that couldn't buy her a new house or fine clothes. She stopped again, her hands trembling as she let go of the sled. She sat down on a rock, her body tired and her spirit weary. For the first time that day, tears welled up in her eyes. The disappointment was overwhelming. She had come so far, pulled so hard, and now it all seemed for nothing. Mary thought about the life she had imagined, the big house, the warm fireplace, the fine clothes, and for a moment she felt utterly defeated. But then, as she sat there, something began to change inside her. Mary wiped away her tears and looked around. The forest was still beautiful, the birds were still singing, the sun was still shining through the trees, casting golden light on the leaves. And then she thought about her life before she had found the pot. She had been happy then, hadn't she? She had her little cottage, her garden, and her kind neighbors. She had laughter, warmth, and love. What more did she really need? Mary took a deep breath. The dreams of luxury and wealth had clouded her mind for a while, but now she could see clearly. Happiness didn't come from gold or silver or iron. It came from the simple joys of life, things she already had. Returning home. With a light heart, Mary stood up and smiled. She left the pot of iron coins where it was, abandoned on the forest path. She didn't need it anymore. Her happiness wasn't tied to what she could buy or own. It was in the life she had built, the relationships she had nurtured, and the peace she had found in living simply. Mary walked back home, her step light, her heart full. When she reached her cottage, her neighbors were waiting for her. They had brought her more gifts, fresh apples from the orchard, warm bread from the bakery. They greeted her with smiles and asked about her walk in the woods. Mary smiled back at them, feeling more grateful than ever. She didn't need gold or silver to be happy. She had something much more valuable, the love and kindness of the people around her. That evening, as she sat by her small fireplace, wrapped in her shawl, Mary felt a deep sense of peace. The fire crackled softly, and the warmth of her home surrounded her. She was content. She had always been rich, not in money, but in the things that truly mattered. And so Mary lived the rest of her days just as she always had, helping her neighbors, sharing stories, and finding joy in the little things. She had learned that true happiness came from within, and no pot of gold could ever replace that.